Hey everyone, it's Allie Bensavenga, and I'm back with another edition of Facts Over Fear, this time with one of my absolute favorite people in the whole world, Liana Maneese, liberation psychotherapist, founder, and clinical director of Transitional Characters. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having this conversation with me.
Oh, absolutely. This is going to be one of many, I think, because this is a big one, and we like to tackle the big topics together. So I'm just going to kick us off because a question that's been in my mind, and of course, you were the person I wanted to talk to about, was I've been hearing from a lot of white people in particular about ICE. This is not who we are. This is not America. And I really want to dissect that today. So let's take it back a little bit and recognize that ICE is uniquely American, not just because it was created after 9/11, which I don't think a lot of people realize how new this organization is, but because it sits on top of a much longer history of state violence in this country. The United States was built through the genocide of the indigenous people of this land, sustained by the enslavement of people forced to labor in this land, and later justified mass incarceration through systems like Japanese American internment camps during World War II, for example. And after 9/11, the same logic has been applied. This fear framed as security produced ICE, folding immigration enforcement into the Department of Homeland Security and giving it unprecedented sweeping powers. Now, I was reading an article from the BBC and I thought it was interesting, so I wanted to note this. ICE wasn't designed as a neutral civil agency. It was built as an enforcement arm. So when you see ICE today, you are not seeing an anomaly. You are seeing a continuation of how this country has repeatedly used law and bureaucracy to control, exclude, and dehumanize. So, Liana, that's what's been floating around in my brain.
Yes.
And you are the person I wanted to dissect that. Really, simple little statement I just shared with everyone. But to kick things off, I just want to get sort of your visceral reaction to what I just read.
You don't want my visceral reaction. But my first thought, of course, is how actually that is really rooted in the exact same rhetoric that the Trump administration is using, which is that you are harking on this like America great again time, where you are ignoring literally every single piece of everything that people fought for during the Civil Rights Act. I mean, everything from, slave patrols, Jim Crow, the black codes, the connection between modern policing and, just completely the full criminalization in every shape of the word of Black people particularly, and also every other type of person of color in America. It is such a gross admission of guilt is how I feel about it.
So let's talk a little bit about the modern immigration enforcement, particularly ICE, as connected, as I alluded to, but obviously I want your thoughts on this, the longer history in this country around settler colonialism, enslavement, and displacement. How do all of these pieces of the puzzle fit together? Because I think people are seeing for the first time the brutality, meaning in particular, white people are seeing for the first time the brutality of these policing systems that non-white people in this country have been begging them to engage with and see. And I go back a little bit to George Floyd because I feel like the windows started opening a little bit, that understanding, that empathy building, and then it was quickly shut again. But from your perspective, when we're looking at this as a collective pieces of this puzzle, how does it all sort of work together in your mind's eye?
Well, it's the hardest thing about my work has been that in my mind, it is what does Sherlock Holmes say? My mind palace, right? It's like in my mind, nothing is disconnected.
Yeah.
And having to explain that it also doesn't have to be that way for you is challenging. But at the end of the day, colonialism is the blueprint to
Hmm.
all of these other institutional, ICE is quite literally and not metaphorically, it is institutionally descended from colonialism. All of this is completely connected in every way. We have such a tendency to completely ignore the truth of where we live and where we inhabit. And when I hear someone say, even just the thought of like, well, I've never seen anything like this, actually, like, that's kind of really telling because we can
Hmm.
think of the first thing that came to my mind hearing that. Or when I've heard it, is that literally your ancestors were having picnics under the hanging bodies of Black people.
Yes.
And it's like, what, like, just because you're choosing to isolate yourself to avoid accountability does not take away the very real um, consequences in how we continue to see this same state-run violence supported by the masses
Hmm.
continue in every way. This is not simply about, locking people up who are, not supposed to be here, right? This is absolutely connected to, like I said, chattel slavery, the attempt at indigenous elimination, all of the racialized policing, incarceration, of all forms. And the other thing that I think is very important to remember here is it's also not disconnected from the separation of families, which is actually kind of one of the major roots of colonialism and how it wins is by actually physically murdering, taking, stealing, or assimilating who's left into this culture. And if you are white, creating an opportunity for you to follow suit or not, as well. As you can see, why certain people are targeted who might be white by ICE. Because if there's something that a racist white person doesn't like more than a Black person themselves, is a white person who supports the lives of Black people. So it's in my mind, it's like this reminder of it's not a failed system. Everything is working exactly how it's supposed to. There's a reason you're not understanding these things or didn't learn these connections in school. There's a
Hmm.
reason why the everything is being bought up, for example, and we're unable to get a true picture of what's happening in the world and what is chosen to be talked about and whose lives are valued to have the conversation. Every single piece of this is connected, and there must be an individual choice to decide that you care about your neighbors enough to understand that that is part of the responsibility.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wanted to touch on something you said because it got me thinking about a reel I saw on Instagram recently where it was a bunch of clips from mostly right wing pundits and
Mhm.
media where it kept saying the most dangerous person right now is the liberal white woman, the liberal white woman, the liberal white woman. And to your point, this idea that you lose your proximity to power, not necessarily just because of the color of your skin, but who then you're choosing to align with.
Yes.
So I find it fascinating that they seem to have a new target currently because, as we know, um, the pipeline, they are very good with cohesion of message. They always have been, and they excel at that. And right now, I'm seeing it everywhere
Mhm.
that the most dangerous person in this country at this moment is the liberal white woman. And I think shooting Renee Good in the head was sort of exemplary of that experience. So, can you talk about then the fragility that is whiteness and why it is in and itself really a delusion? Because it doesn't actually exist. It doesn't actually mean anything other than, to your point, upholding the structure.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, I think it has to do with, what is in it for you. I when I think about wasn't it Renee Good who they said that they called her like a bitch or something right before or something?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, and I
Yes.
think that is so important.
Mhm.
Right?
Right
Because it's
after he shot her.
yeah,
Yes.
right. So that's okay because I was like there was something that I remember about
Mhm.
that and I think
Mhm.
that is also so telling And, if you actually study the history, we also know that white women were actually known to be even more brutal when they took over, if their husbands passed away or something happened during enslavement and they became, in charge, they were actually more brutal.
Mm.
And, this is something that, when we think about nonprofits, when we think about philanthropy, when we think about all of these structures and you really look into the history of them, they are really created. So, I mean, even like social work in a lot of ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
These systems were initially really created so that we could have this illusion of saving and helping, right? When really the violence is like so deep. And I think one of the things that's important to mention as well is that when you think about how this feels very uniquely American, not only is it because, of course, we have this bureaucracy of, just pure cruelty, but also, there's this idea of Americans, and I think that American women, particularly white women, fit into this so well, of this idea of calm with innocence, this like equating these things, legality with morality,
Mm.
and order, this concept of order without justice. And one of the most important reasons I think we also want to talk about white women in this practice as well is that these are the mothers.
Yeah.
So we can't leave that out conveniently, right? And I think we've also seen that on the internet. I found out my husband believed in this or that or whatever or the other thing, and it's like nobody is surprised, nobody else is surprised
No.
about this, right? And
Right.
the comfort is and has always been the point, right? Because we do not want to sacrifice our comfort for something that we can decide not to even see. So why
Mm-hmm.
am I sacrificing this comfort that I have and this power ultimately, right?
Yeah.
When I can cut off, really engaging in it, and seeing what's happening in Congo, for example, or seeing what's happening in Palestine. Now we can see it on our phones. You
Yeah.
can't escape it. This has completely changed the narrative. And it also has to do with the fact that we know that this violence exists by targeting the family. We have to keep coming back to this understanding that even with whiteness, it's targeting the family, right? So what it's teaching women to be, to do, which there's plenty of commentary on that to go very far,
Mhm. Right.
in terms of whiteness and women and how you're taught to engage with society or your husband or raise children. But
Mhm.
everything is very focused on this ultimate being submissive. And even this idea, when I think about white women being like, well, I'm not like that. It's like, okay, there's a big difference between saying and doing, you
Yeah.
know? And I remember this quote. I remember because I think it was like Michelle Obama said something like this, but I come back to it because I think it's really important. But she said, we raise our girls and we nurture our boys. And I thought about that so much
Mm.
because really that is absolutely true. We have created systemically, which is not how indigenous people or African people have traditionally done any of these things.
Mhm.
Whiteness has created this system of characteristics that basically separate the family from within through emotional neglect, through this idea that you keep this distance of accountability. And that is the point, right? And so just remembering that this is just like this never ending connection
Yeah.
that is happening, that is not simply about white women on its own, but that white women are actually the passports, the reason why men can continue to carry this out, because they continue to stay in the relationships, they continue to raise the young men and women, right? And they are not doing anything differently. If they were, we would be in a different situation. Therapy has been around for a long time. Racism, still there, right? White
Mhm.
people have had these opportunities to do work on themselves and are not actually doing the work, or we would be in a very different situation than we are today. But absolutely, it is connected to a capacity, right?
Mhm.
It's a weakened capacity by choice. And I think that that
Mhm.
is the thing, just like any childhood trauma.
Yeah.
At some point, you become an adult and you make your own choices. And there's only so long that we can stay in this victim role. But of course, we know that that victim role is so deeply embedded in the connection to whiteness, white motherhood, and the concept of being a wife, a white wife. And I think that you don't have to go far to see that in its extreme, but the liberalism is just the other side of it, if you think
Yeah.
about it as a spectrum, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's an illusion. But the root of it is still the same, which is why people can still say, or liberals can still say, huh, what?
Yeah.
What do you mean? Because ultimately, they're still encased and believing
Mm-hmm.
the same system, right? Of just the psychological propaganda
Mm-hmm.
that they have been exposed to forever. And they are just trying to separate themselves from that. But it does not take away from the fact that we can all still see your very, very real actions
Yeah.
every day. And yeah, so I mean, I could go on and on about that, but I think that it absolutely is psychological in many ways, you know.
And I think that's why it was, in my mind, an example being made of Renee
Mhm.
Good, because she stepped out of that frame.
Yes, she did.
And we don't want that, because if there's a sense of self-awareness and a sense of community building and a sense of allyship, that is a threat then to the structure in which you are talking about.
And what happened right after that, I think, is also important,
Yes.
right? What happened right after that was that became all we talked about.
Yes.
And there are many, 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 too many to count names
Yes.
that were completely left out of the conversation until that moment.
That's right.
And that is more telling. I think that we like to really focus on these specific instances, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's the same reason why we choose to think about, what's happening in the world, with, it's Republicans, it's
Right.
Trump specifically, it's everyone in the Epstein file. Yes, all of these things, like, yes, these people are absolutely monsters, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay. And nobody was protecting any of these victims.
That's
Literally
right.
no one. Literally no. So where is everybody else? And this concept of, I mean, really, it's just like this game that you're playing, right? That a good therapist will never let you play. Of of creating this like boogeyman that's like,
Uh-huh.
yes, it's real, but you're able to use it as a scapegoat. It's focusing on these bad actors and all, it's convenient and allows you to say, it's not me. And it allows them to absorb all the blame for actually what is a majority failing. It's a
Yes.
it's a systemic failure on all of our parts in many ways because we let a few people do the work for so long. And this framing protects the system, which goes back to why, this whole Renee Good thing, I think, is such a good example of whiteness and the whiteness culture in America and how liberals continue to show their ass because it
Mm-hmm.
keeps coming back to this protecting of the system ultimately, which is what we see with the argument around the two-party system in general. Because it's still there. It's all
Yeah.
still there. And we're using these ideas of, race and gender, for example, as scapegoats to why, for example, Kamala and people didn't vote for her.
Right.
Instead of being honest about the fact that it had to do with policy, because anybody that actually understands racism in America understands that it's about policy.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then even further than that, it has to do with, really dismantling the whole thing. But if you can't even get to the point where you as an individual can see that piece of it, that it is about that policy, that these policies that you are supporting that are upholding, the protection of some and the
Mm-hmm.
quite frank murder of others, murder and what they're attempting, which is elimination or
Mm-hmm.
enslavement, right? By other names, it continues to keep this idea that violence is individualized, so the responsibility disappears,
That's right.
and that is what we are facing right now.
I couldn't agree more. And this is exactly why I wanted to have this conversation, because this was the catalyst in my mind for wanting to talk to you about this, was because her being centered, to your point, was like the first time that some people were paying attention, and it negated, it ignored all of the countless trauma and murder and all of these things that have been going on and on and on. And so thank you for all of that. I also wanted to bring in this book because Liana and I have been friends a really long time, you guys. In fact, she's also a paid subscriber to my Substack, which just shows you how much she loves me. Okay. But so shout out to you, Liana, for caring and being so supportive of my work. But you had recommended this book a really long time to me, and it was called My Grandmother's Hands, Racialized Trauma and the Pathway to Mending Our Hearts and Bodies. I really recommend this book for people if you're like me and you want to be more aware and discover some hard truths and sit with them and also evolve and hopefully, become a better version of yourself, a version that continues to care beyond your own home and your own life, which is really how we're going to get ourselves out of this, is
I mean,
caring beyond our own home.
there's only really one way.
That's really it. And so I wanted to play a fun game
Mhm.
where I where I read a few quotes from this book, not in any particular order, but that are sort of related to this theme that we've been talking about. And I just want to get your thoughts on them in this moment. So the first one comes from James Baldwin, and it says, "White people have quite enough to do in learning how to accept and love themselves and each other. And when they have achieved this, the Negro problem will no longer exist, for it will no longer be needed."
Yes.
How do you feel about that?
If everything that man hasn't said,
I know.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is the thing, right? I mean, especially right now during like Black History Month, it's like we have again had this unhealthy equation of, what we grow up learning is that Black history is enslavement. The Black history is enslavement, and that is the point of framing it in these ways, right, over time, through the education system in this country. It allows for this complete denial of white culture. Whiteness is a culture. It is where we live. It is unescapable. It is undeniable. That is just what it is. This is not an opinion. This is what it is. There are very clear characteristics associated with that, and very key mechanisms that have to be in place to allow these systems to continue to perpetuate themselves against certain groups of people. Some of those examples would be just dehumanizing people, as we saw today with the White House, I don't know if it was yesterday or today with the post coming out from the White House depicting not just the Obamas as animals, but actually a whole swath of people. So dehumanization, stereotyping, all of the fear mongering that we see through, propaganda that allows, people to stay afraid so that they don't act. And, just this continuation of this. I mean, even in a therapeutic way, something that's been on my mind recently and very upsetting is that I've observed not only therapists in real time, but also online having these conversations around distancing yourself and prioritizing comfort and, this sort of concept that, healing is somehow supposed to equal peace, or something along those lines. But really, what it requires is much, 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 much greater. And I think it's going to be the difference between, where we are and where we can be if people can really understand that this is a conversation that needs to be had with yourself, which I think is we need to be understanding our own privilege, our own identities. I've had people come to me having conversations about ICE not taking into consideration who they're talking to, as if Black people or brown people, or just the fact that you don't know anything about me, right? that you can, that, you're unique to some sort of experience, which we absolutely see, white passing people doing, and all, creating this like fear, when the reality is you're still carrying on this sort of like colorblind narrative in so many ways. But it really takes truth. It takes the ability to withstand rupture. It takes the ability to repair and come back in with accountability, and to be courageous. Nobody and no therapist should be having a conversation with anybody right now about backing off. I don't care if the person is neurodivergent. I don't care what kind of disability is going on. There is no conversation about backing off that is acceptable at this time. There is absolutely zero. Everybody, I mean, if you understand disability in America and the connection to anti-racism, you know that almost every person that has done everything brave has been disabled.
That's right.
So I don't want to hear any of that from anybody. And if you are doing that in your own mind, or with your therapist, or with your friends, you are absolutely part of the problem that I am speaking to. Because this is not a situation where we can just like ride the waves and watch like we've been doing. The fact that we literally have entire communities not going out of their home because they're getting snatched up, murdered, separated from their families, literally every single thing. And if you think that watching a live stream genocide wasn't to prepare you for what was to come in your own space, you are lying to yourself. And that lying to yourself kills people. And I need everyone to hear me when I say that. Lying to yourself by not making the connections between the files, between fascism, between racism, between Republicans, between Democrats, your own identity and not navigating it, right? Between ICE, the way that you even think about immigration at all while you occupy stolen land is all connected, and not just a reflection of this country. It is a reflection of us individually. And we have to do things collectively, but the collective doesn't work if we don't do the individual work to truly sit with that. And I think that is going to be, the choice. I mean, even the book you mentioned, I can tell you how many times people have come to me and said they've read that book. You know how many people say that they actually did the work inside the book because it's a workbook?
Right. It's different.
I think maybe like 2 people or something have actually told me like, oh, I did the work. No one is doing it. The fear, the comfort is so overwhelming.
Well, and to your point, I just wanted to add, and then I want to ask you your thoughts on another quote from the book. You mentioned healing, and you said it's not peaceful, or it's not about peace. That couldn't be true. That couldn't be more true, because if you look at it from a biological perspective, when you cut yourself, for example, there is a war going on under the skin in order to
100%.
make you heal. And if you're lucky, you heal with a scar, maybe a faded scar, but there is a mark left on you
100%.
from that healing. You are not the same. You are never the same. So this idea that healing is easy, that it's something that's linear, that in and of itself, we're framing that in a way, to your point, that is instilling this concept of comfort that in actuality does not happen even at the biological level, right?
No.
So you can't separate that. Okay, so here's this is actually a good quote, because it actually fits a lot of what you're sharing right now. This is just from the book itself. This isn't someone outside the author didn't share this. This says, "You do not have to choose between being a loyal cop who enforces white body supremacy and a traitor who protects and serves the community. You can choose a third option, being a justice leader." What does that say to you? How does that feel to you?
What happened in my body right now is kind of like way more intense than I expected it to be. Um, because it's so disappointing, because there is the binary opposition of good and evil has so deeply committed itself. The message has so deeply committed itself to why we are in the situation that we're in, on so many levels. And this concept of even justice is so binary, right? I mean, if you think about it in terms of this like justice system, which we know is unjust, but lots of people, liberals, believe that things should still operate within these systems, which are violent inherently. You can't have both, people. You cannot have both. And we want to stay in that place as a group, a grouping of people where, the people who are truly affected are, we know. I mean, we're aware. We are like, this is not going to work. But there's
Yeah.
always these people, and all skin folk ain't your kin folk. I'll just say that real quick, right? It's like there's always, somebody who's, running to the other side for the same reason. They don't have the capacity.
Mm.
They don't have the capacity. But, I think it really requires a deep understanding of history. It requires a deep understanding of how you see and understand justice. You can only understand justice as far as you have read and understood justice. It's not this like opinion in your head that's like, whatever, this is what I think. You have to be rooted in something. And I think that that's what we see is many people, if not most people, are not rooted. They're not rooted at all, let alone rooted in the truth. And you cannot make good choices for yourself or others when you don't have your feet firmly on the ground. And so that quote makes me really think about, the importance that everybody individually understand and process who they are in relationship to their community, and just the importance of that and how this has really not happened. The rage is not big enough of a word. When we were going to
Yeah.
have this conversation, Natalie, I thought, there are not big enough words. Monster, this, that. There are not big enough words. The words, they are buried somewhere in an indigenous culture that I don't have access to.
Mm.
That is where the words are. I don't have the words to describe not just the people who are very openly who they are, but all of the people who are allowing it to happen because they are cowards.
Yeah. Period.
And it is sad
Mm-hmm.
to think about how many people will be offended by that statement that I just made.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
you have to sit with yourself and say, is that who I am? Is that what I'm telling other people to do and be? And that you are, if that is in fact what you are doing, supporting all of this state, all of it, all of it. You are allowing it to happen. You're allowing it to happen. Everybody has a different role. Everybody's not,
Mm-hmm.
we don't even have to get into that. But if you
Yeah.
are allowing this thought process, this disconnection, then you absolutely cannot excuse yourself from the very real violence, because the real violence, as I've heard you say on other shows, is passivity.
Yeah.
And the greatest violence, that the state does is create this, and we perpetuate it. And, what the majority allows is real. It's real. There are real children who are being separated, who are violently being murdered, bombed. Like, this is real. Americans have separated themselves throughout history from this fact. And that fear that it could be you is allowing you to put yourself so in front of children screaming, being separated or bombed or burned. Are you not like, can you sit individually as a person
Yeah.
and process that to say, what am I doing? I am a coward. Say, I am a coward.
Mm-hmm.
I am allowing these things to happen all around me and doing nothing, and have been for a long time. And I'm glad if you are moved to change now. But even if you are, it just means there's even so much more work to do, because you
Yeah.
have to make those connections. And this is not just about ICE. Everyone knows this is, if you pay attention, this is This is a continuation. This is not a new thing. This is a continuation of white supremacy. It's a continuation of supremacy from different types of people that are white in different parts of the world. It is supremacy culture. Every victim, every oppressed person understands this. And if you do not fit into that category, you have to sit with God or
That's
whoever that is, right? Whatever that is, the tree in your own body, I don't care, but you are going to have to face this very, very real reality. There is not a psychological term or pathology or a conversation that's going to get you out of your humanity. It's not going to. You're either in it or you're not in it. And if you can't do that work, then you are responsible and you will be held responsible
Mhm.
at some point.
I know. I so appreciate all of your thoughts.
I don't know if I
Leon,
went in the direction you wanted
no,
me to go with.
no, there was no right way to go. I wanted to use these as jumping off points to get your thoughts exactly for that. So you could just share what was on your heart and on your mind, but using this as sort of a catalyst for that experience. That's exactly why I started Facts Over Fear, was exactly what you said. We have to talk about the truth of things in order
Yes.
to overcome not just the
Mhm.
external fear mongering, but the internal fear, right? It's scary.
Yes.
It's scary to sit
Mhm.
with it. It's
Mhm.
scary to ask yourself, what am I willing to do? What am I willing to lose?
Yes.
And a lot of people in this country have just been very comfortable for a very long time. And so we're in
Mhm.
a place where I think there is this pivotal moment happening. And I'll forever be the eternal optimist. I do think a lot more people are waking up to the reality that they can't sit in that fear any longer. They have to see where they're at and acknowledge that something needs to shift. Leon, are you there? I feel like, oh no. I feel like we might have lost her, everybody. Liana, I'm so sorry we're having technical issues here at the end, but you know how much I love you and so appreciate you and just admire you. Liana and I have been doing shows like this together for many years, and I absolutely just love being in conversation with her. So I'm hoping we can do this again very soon. And of course, everyone, until next time, take care of yourselves and each other. Have a good night.